Everybody should see Gunther receiving the ball, right? Okay. So, ready? You're on, Gunther.
Okay, thank you very much, Mihai, and thank you for the very kind introduction. Hi, everybody. It's funny that you're waving at the TV screen because I'm looking at you at a different angle, but yeah, I'm over there indeed. So cool, great that you're there. Thank you very much for joining. Thank you very much, Mihai, for the invitation and for facilitating this together with the team, obviously. So it's great that you started with this thing called Why. I don't know if anybody ever read the book Start with Why from Simon Sinek. Really advisable literature. Um, I want to share some ideas about why I think Scrum actually works. And to give you some background. Um, okay, so I can't share right now just yet, Mihai, by the way, but I've sent a request to share. But I'll start talking anyhow. I don't know if anybody remembers. So we are now May 2025. I don't know if anybody remembers what happened 5 years ago, around this time, spring 2020. I don't know how that was in Romania, but I'm going to assume that you were all locked into your rooms. You couldn't leave. You couldn't touch people. You couldn't feel people. You were not allowed to come near to people. You know, in Belgium, we had this 1.5 meter distance thing. No buses, no trains, whatever. Crazy thing happening. This Corona thing coming over us, and I'm actually a very slow person. I have to think when I have to think about something. I need to think really long and really hard. And what I remember from those days, let's say the early days, the first lockdown period. It's a historical thing. What I remember mainly is two things. First of all, I don't know how it was in Romania, but it looks like over here it was an invitation for people to start massively buying toilet paper. Every, everybody went to the supermarket, shops, whatever, and bought toilet paper. There was no toilet paper left. We bought all of the stocks worldwide, it seems. It's sort of crazy. And another thing that happened was that all physical contact was certainly forbidden, and all my classes were canceled because you couldn't see people, you couldn't touch them, let alone hug them or whatever, teach them about Scrum. And something that happened in my world is that so many people were like, "Oh yeah, no problem, we'll just do it online now." And I was like, no, I have to think about this. It took me a while before I embraced online teaching. And in the meantime, I wanted to do something useful, imagine. And I thought about identifying for myself based upon my experience. So I've been doing Scrum since 2003. Um, why does Scrum actually work? What is it that makes Scrum work? And I was inspired by two things that were happening by then. There was a new Scrum guide in the making. It was launched in the end in November 2020. I think around April it was in the making, and I decided that I didn't want to be involved anymore, given the direction it was taken. And something else that was happening. Too many people out there, LinkedIn, whatever, are so focused, obsessed almost by the Scrum Guide. Although I see the importance, I know the importance having a body of knowledge for Scrum, unique, clear definition, simple, whatever. I see the value, but so many people are focused on the Scrum Guide, the nuts and bolts of the Scrum Guide. Why do they say it like this? Why do they put a hyphen over there? Why do they put a comma over there? What does the italic of that word mean? It's like, oh my God. It's like sort of like trying to learn a language by studying the dictionary. If I would ever, I would love to, but no immediate plans, by the way. But if I would ever decide to come over and live in Romania, and I would love to learn to speak your local language and languages, I wouldn't be studying the dictionary. I would go out, I would speak, I would talk to people, I would make incredible stupid mistakes, I would be corrected, I would learn from that. So that it inspired me to think about no, Scrum, you have to learn Scrum in the first place by playing it, by doing it, applying, going out there and playing the game. Find out for yourself how it works, how it doesn't work. So I wanted to help people in a way. I can't come over there and help everybody play the game, but what I could do is try to get people over their obsession with the rules, let's say the laws of Scrum. And beyond the terminology and beyond the details and the formalities and the technicalities, whatever described or not described in the Scrum Guide. So I thought about identifying why Scrum works. Um, and I call it, I identified 6 elements and I call them the 6 essential traits of decay. In a way, what I call them the essential traits that will show whether your Scrum has come to life or not. So it's why Scrum works, but it's also a way to judge, assess in a way to see is your Scrum actually working for you. Because in a strange way you can sort of follow the process technically, whatever, and still might not be coming to life. And the 6 essential traits that I identified and that I shared also in a paper by then. So I wrote a paper about it in the spring of 2020. In a way, I was happy that it came out long before the Scrum Guide. And the 6 essential traits for me were the simplicity of Scrum. Scrum is simple. Scrum's DNA, accountability and players demonstrating accountability, a flow of value, how Scrum is an instrument to generate a flow of value, how it's important to close the loops, and how it's important to enact the Scrum values, as Mihai said. Regarding the Scrum values, a long time ago, I'm old, you can judge that by my beard. So back in 2013, so I started with Scrum in 2003. 10 years later, I wrote a little book about Scrum. It's called the Scrum a Pocket Guide. And in that pocket guide, I described the Scrum values. Up to that point, they had sort of disappeared. They were ever described in the first book by Ken Schwaber and Mike Beadle, long time ago, 2002. And they had sort of disappeared, and I described them in my book. And so those are the 6 essential traits of Scrum. So the first trait is the simplicity of Scrum. So for me, Scrum is simple yet sufficient, meaning Scrum is in a way incomplete, but through its incompleteness, it is complete enough. And a phrase that certainly Ken Schwaber likes to use a lot is just use it as is. Stop discussing, debating, what should we do not, and so on. Also, this idea, you might know this of we have sort of reduced the definition of Scrum to something very minimal. So Scrum is very minimalist. That means everything that might be unnecessary has been removed already. Yet lots of organizations, so Scrum is already so simple, yet lots of organizations seem to want to cherry pick. Oh yeah, we're going to this part of Scrum and not that part of Scrum. It's like, yeah, but it's already so simple. What makes you think that you can leave out stuff? But then it seems that but we don't do this because we do other stuff. And in that sense, undermine the simplicity of Scrum in 2 ways: by omitting stuff that shouldn't be omitted, and then by overloading Scrum with lots of other stuff. And just demonstrate that simplicity of Scrum, which I called in my paper 5 years ago, Scrum in a nutshell. Essentially, in Scrum, a Scrum Master, as somebody with mastery in Scrum, but I like to call myself a Scrum caretaker. I was recently thinking about how that would be defined, because I started calling me that in 2016, and people said it might be a sort of better, almost broader term for Scrum Master. Now, I got no control over these things, so let's call it a Scrum Master for the time being. A Scrum Master fosters an environment where, and that happens repeatedly, a product owner, the owner of a product, orders ideas, functions, thoughts, whatever, orders them for value against an overarching product vision. Again, start with why. Have a product owner that knows why are we building, creating, updating, whatever, evolving this product. Why? Let the why drive you. And the product owner makes that tangible by ordering ideas for value. And then a team of developers. One of the changes in the Scrum Guide, we can't call it development team anymore, so I always sneakingly call it a team of developers anyhow. A team of developers creates valuable increments of that product no later than by the end of a sprint. And then all players figure out what to work on next and how to best organize for that. So Scrum organizes all works in short cycles, and this happens every cycle, hence the repeatedly. That is the simplicity of Scrum. Now, one of the roles that is often in a lot of organizations sort of omitted is that Scrum Master thing, because people have this strange, silly idea. Oh yeah, the role of a Scrum Master is to make himself or herself obsolete. But it's not true. I often compare a Scrum Master to the trainer of a sports team. Going back to the analogy of Scrum and the game of rugby. And even this week in the class, I asked somebody who asked that question. He was a Scrum Master coach, and he asked, Gunther, will I have a future? And I asked him, how many sports teams do you know that do not have a trainer? And he said, none probably. No. Amateur level, small level, big things, national teams, Champions League teams, whatever competition, whatever, they all have a trainer. Every group of people, although that all those players, whether it's rugby, football, or volleyball, basketball, whatever, all those players know the game. They know the rules. They know how to play it. Yet they all benefit from having that person who makes observations, who injects ideas, who challenges ideas, and so on. Something more, somebody sometimes more, sometimes less. So for me, the ultimate purpose of a Scrum Master is what I call to become invisibly present. Your presence is needed. Another thing that happens while people think that Scrum Master is not really important, it seems that product owner is so important that everybody started to have product owners. Also, not in the context of Scrum, let's say. Which is strange because product owner was a term identified, created as part of Scrum back in the early 2000s. And so I always think if somebody says product owner, I always think, okay, that must mean they're doing Scrum. But it doesn't seem to be that way. So it's just cherry picking in a way. So think about it, the simplicity of Scrum. And that simplicity then leads me to say, okay, how Scrum works. So overall, the story is, okay, why Scrum work? Let me also dive into a little bit still on how Scrum works. So we know the Scrum in a nutshell thing. Long time expression not used a lot anymore. I think Alistair Coburn came up with it a long time ago in after the Agile Manifesto probably. Slicing whatever you need to think into what we call product backlog items. So product backlog containing product backlog items, slicing the elephant. How do you eat an elephant? By eating it in slices, sort of the idea. Now, it's not an official part of Scrum. Product vision, it's not official, it's not an artifact, whatever. Still, I think it's really, really, really important. Hence, it's also in my Scrum in a nutshell, and I'll add it to my pictures always. So we slice the elephant, we create product backlog items. That's sprint planning. We select a number of items, create a sprint backlog for them. Every 24 hours, the developers are going to have a look at where do we stand, what is working, what is not working, who needs help, and so on. So how are we going to work during the next day of work until the next daily Scrum with the ambition to produce at least one, but potentially multiple increments of the product throughout or at least by the end of the sprint. Now we're going to look at what did we create, what are we going to do next, how did we work, how are we going to work next. And that's something we do every 1 to 4 weeks. So that is how Scrum works. That is the simplicity of Scrum. With the 3 accountabilities, we're addressing every possible aspect that is needed. That makes it a self-managing team, although I tend to stick to the idea of self-organizing, calling them self-organizing. That's also one of the changes in the Scrum Guide. Yeah. Now, that is all needed to tackle complexity. Huh? Adaptability, working in short cycles, inspection, adaptation, regularly inspecting and adapting, certainly by the end of sprint, but even within the sprint, the daily scrum. In the latest update of my little book, I said, you know what, if even a sprint could be fixed, no changes, whatever, we would not need a daily scrum. Yet we need a daily scrum because even in a sprint, changes might come up that we need to capitalize or can capitalize on or at least take into account. So Scrum is implementing what we call the empirical process or implementing empirical process control, or in short, empiricism. Now, Scrum's DNA for me consists of two important management principles, meaning empiricism on the one hand, but the one that is overlooked way too much is self-organization. And for me, empiricism, sort of the blue aspect of Scrum, meaning the process aspect of Scrum, where self-organization is sort of the hot aspect of Scrum, it's the people aspect. Huh? Scrum thrives on adaptability by working in short cycles. That is needed to address complexity, but what is needed to address complexity too is bring a group of experts, experienced people, skilled people together and ask them to collectively tackle the problems. Because one person alone can't handle it, a group of individuals can't handle it. You need that idea of collective intelligence. So Scrum's purpose is to help us deal with complexity, unpredictability, lots of uncertainties, many unknowns, things will change, often beyond our control. We want to not just be able to deal with that sort of change, but we even want to capitalize on it. We want to take it, we want to turn it into a power, something that makes us stronger. In a way, goes back to the idea of anti-fragility, if anybody read the book. So we not just want to be able to change, but we want to take advantage of it. But self-organization, in my experience, still with oh my God, over 20 years of experience with Scrum, self-organization is so underused. Most organizations having their roots in sort of an industrial way to look at work, think in terms of processes and methods, and they look at the process aspect of Scrum and they forget that it will only really flourish if you add self-organization to that. Now, to be clear, what does that mean, self-organization? I looked things up in the dictionary a long time ago. Self-organization, funny enough, in the English dictionary, this is from the Oxford whatever dictionary, it's not really a noun. So in a way, funny thing is self-organization does not exist according to the dictionary. But why is that a good thing? Because it only exists in the dictionary as a verb, to self-organize, which is good. So, but in the context of Scrum, for me, self-organization means it's the process of people forming organized groups, meaning self-organizing around problems or challenges without external work plans or instructions being imposed on them. We need people with skills, expertise together to put all of their heads together and figure out how to do it, what needs to be done. Protected, let's say, by the inspection adaptation process, we add to that. This also goes back to the paper of 1986, the new product development game, where we get the term Scrum from. They identified the 6 characteristics of self-organization or revolving around self-organization, 6 characteristics of what makes certain teams in certain organizations better at new product development. With our roots in software development, every product that we create is a new product because we never replicate them, duplicate them, whatever, produce 100 versions of it or whatever. So that is self-organization. That is also where the power of Scrum lies. Self-organization is important. It is part of us as human beings. Every single human being can self-organize. You all do that at home. When you go on a holiday, when you have to plan things with maybe your partner, children, family, friends, whatever. If you go out, if you buy a car, if you move houses, if you buy a new house, whatever, you all do that without hierarchical authority on top of you. So it's in us. Every single human being has the intrinsic ability to self-organize. Why are we then not allowing that ability to be applied in the workplace? So if people, management or leadership, whatever, thinks, yeah, but our people are not up for it, nonsense. Every single human being can self-organize. It has nothing to do with maturity or whatever. It's about removing the barriers to self-organization, which is for me the role of management. What is keeping our people from actually self-organizing and removing those barriers? Those might be mental, psychological, whatever. They might be in the structures of the organization. They might be in the lack of authorization, no access to systems, whatever, anything. That is important. And Scrum in the end provides boundaries to get the most out of self-organization, meaning accountabilities, 3 accountabilities, some rules to follow, and above all, time boxing. Stopping in time so that you can stop, look back, reflect, and so on. Those are boundaries of self-organization, and self-organization needs them actually. Now, self-organization means no external parties imposing on you and your teams how to do your work on a daily basis. So in the absence of external instructions, which is a good thing, it's much better to drive teams forward with purpose, vision. Again, why? Why are we building this product? Why do our customers think this is important? What is our organization hoping to get out of this? And be driven by that shared purpose is what unites people, what helps a group of individuals become a team. So that is important. And why one of the reasons why I will keep talking about self-organization, it's not just because it was already in that 1986 paper, but self-organization is for me the overarching principle. And there are many ways or almost levels, areas of self-organization. The minimum level of self-organization that we want in Scrum, otherwise for me it's not Scrum, is the level in which a team manages itself throughout a sprint. Nobody external to the team is going to tell anybody within the team who should be doing what at what point of time. The minimal rule to guide that, as I said, minimal rules, is that we ask at least the developers within a sprint to check in on themselves on a daily basis. Hopefully also visualize their progress so that they apply visual management techniques to manage themselves. But that's the only rule that we have. We're not going to tell you how to do your job, but we would ask you to assess yourselves, check in on yourselves on a daily basis next to the other events. So that's self-managing. Now, if people are capable and creative and intelligent enough to do that, that for me means that people are also creative and intelligent enough to be self-designing. That means form their teams, reform their teams, split the team, merge teams, add people to the team, potentially even nasty thing, or not necessarily nasty, but it sounds dangerous, remove people from the team. So self-designing. That means if people can manage their own work in the sprint against purpose and against the goal to produce a releasable, it's now called in Scrum Guide, usable increment of product, that means they can also decide who do we need, who do we no longer need, what else do we need, what people do we need, is it better to work with another team independently, is it better to merge, whatever. So build on the insights that people have. Yeah? And as you go up that level, let's say a ladder almost of self-organization, why not in the end at some level, might not be exactly the team, why not have people think about compensations, education they need, trainings they need, promotion rewards, incentives, anything. Up to the point that maybe in a small organization you might have a team that is completely self-directing, no hierarchy, nobody on top. So it depends also a little bit on size of the organization, in what area or what realm you would organize for this, but self-organization crucial in Scrum. As we said, minimal rules, in a way the process to follow, but also accountabilities to enact. Product owner, we know one word, if you would have one word as a keyword for the purpose of a product owner, it would be value. If one word for the developers, it would be creating done increments, and that one word would then be for me quality, deliver quality, make an implementation of high quality. And a Scrum Master, it's about Scrum. In that sense, product owner focus on the what, developers focus on the how, Scrum Master focus on the on Scrum, and within Scrum certainly on the who. What are we doing the process, but also the who, the people themselves. So the people and the process. So, and it's all part of, in a way, the simplicity of Scrum, but it's also about accountability. And these are the accountabilities of Scrum. So in the end, what is important about the idea of a team in Scrum, and I mean team in general, a team for me in Scrum means it's a cross-functional collective, a multidisciplinary collective of people committed, here we go with one of the Scrum values, to the shared purpose of creating valuable increments of product. That is what unites a team. That is what makes out a team. People that are willing to transcend their function description, their job description, to do something that they've never done before, to help out something in an expertise that they themselves are no experts in. That is what is a team. And I think back of the sports analogy again, you might have a football team, a soccer team, you might have a goalkeeper, you might people having attacking midfield players and so on. In the end, there might be switching positions as needed. Imagine having a midfielder saying, I'm not going to leave sort of the mid area of the field because that's not my domain, it's not my function description. I'm not reviewed for that. I don't get a performance review for that. I'm not promoted for that. So I'm not leaving my area of the field. That's sort of not really helpful if you want to be a team. So think about it. And with Scrum about accountabilities, it's about demonstrating accountabilities. And that is important. You want those people within the team, the three accountabilities, to demonstrate that they can be accountable, which is a very different thing than in the old school, almost hierarchical thinking again, holding people accountable or expecting whatever people to be accountable. Holding people accountable, that is still hierarchy. Demonstrating accountability, you want people to step up, stick out their head, sometimes take a risk, take a chance, whatever, collectively, and show that they can be accountable. That's so important. So that is Scrum's DNA. Empiricism and self-organization, the empirical process and self-organization. But obviously, this will not just magically happen. It requires Scrum Master, coach, team, whatever. But there is no way to introduce Scrum without having an impact on the broader organization. How does HR work with people? How do we judge people? How do we review people? How does management work? How does funding work? How does budgeting work? How do we deal with governance? How do we deal with compliance? How do we deal with, in the end, potentially even release processes and so on? So there's no way to introduce Scrum without having a deep, broad impact on the organization. Yet, lots of organizations seem to believe that. Oh yeah, Scrum, that's just for the teams. Yeah, it might be, but introducing Scrum at the team level is going to have an impact on the rest of the organization. So it also requires a sort of management mindset shift within the organization. And again, 1986 already, those two Japanese professors, if you know them, Taikochi Nonake, already said it. Organizations need to adapt a management style that promotes this process, the process that they in the end called Scrum, which was those 6 things around self-organization. That means if you want to benefit, truly benefit from self-organization, and we've combined it with the empirical process, if you really want to benefit from that, you have to be open to adopt a new management style, a different way of dealing with people, of handling people, of trying to, let's say, control people. Ultimately, if I would try to summarize that, it goes from trying to manage people or control people towards managing the environment, creating a context. And practically, so we have a Scrum team. with three accountabilities, clear accountabilities. Next to the Scrum team, often in organizations, you've got at least sort of three, or there are at least three types of people, roles, whatever that the Scrum team needs to deal with within the organization, stakeholders, obviously. The role of stakeholders is Scrum. They might be management, leadership, whatever. They might be from the financial department, might be from the marketing, whatever. The role of stakeholders in Scrum is to provide input and feedback, give feedback to the team so that the team can do a better job, often with regards to potential strategic direction, strategic beliefs of the organization, things that might be happening on the market that competition might be doing as well. Yeah? But it's again, not all of these things happen at the peer level, at the same level. Yeah? Obviously, every product, the services that we build, the products that we build, the experience that we try to offer is for consumers, people consuming our product. And I've constantly called it consumer to make it clear that it's for the people actually using the product, not people potentially buying the product, because that might be different people, not the purchasing, whatever department, but the people consuming the product. And next to that, within the organization, you might have SMEs, subject matter experts, people with specific insights, specific expertise that we as a Scrum team might be needing and that we're going to consult with them for. Stakeholders looking at strategies, direction that we're taking, long-term direction, maybe long-term viability of the organization, and so on. Consumers obviously with their minds in the product and what the product has to offer to them. And subject matter experts, often people with certain expertise that we need to develop or create a better product. So that's a different way of looking at it. And this is in a way about moving authority down the line. Authority with regards to all the aspects of product development lie with the Scrum team, and they work with other parties to do that. One of sort of rules that we have in Scrum for the product owner is to offer transparency. It's an accountability. The goal of the product owner is value, and the product owner makes the flow of value that he or she envisions visible, insightful, transparent via that product backlog. So when I said in my Scrum in a nutshell, a product owner orders ideas and so on for value, that means it means that the highest value items are always on top. The things that bring the most important items, including dependencies, obviously that might be a limitation to ordering for value uniquely, but it's the role of the product owner. It's a living artifact. That means at every single point in time, it should have the most important items on top. So that every sprint, again, we work on the most important items, the most valuable items, not the ones that we thought 6 months ago that we're going to have to need. No, looking at the current situation, current demands, market situation, user demands, and so on. It's what we call the single source of truth. If anybody wants to know within the organization, who's authorized to know it, by the way, and wants to know what is happening, what is planned for the product, should be able to just look at this one artifact and not sort of compile or merge mentally 4 or 5 artifacts and see, okay, what is really happening now? No, very clear and ordered product backlog and ordered for value. So that it shows that how are we going to generate a flow, a continuous stream, a regular stream of value towards consumers, the organization probably because they sponsor us and are represented by the stakeholders. So it's about value. It's about doing the right stuff. It's not about doing the most stuff. It's not about doing more stuff. It's not about output. Obviously, we have to create output. The increment is output. But it's not about the size of the output. It's about the impact of our output, which is the outcome, impact that we have, value that we could generate. And that's why product is so important. In my paper 5 years ago, I called it already the vehicle for value. Product is a vehicle for value that also made its way into the Scrum Guide later on, I believe. So Scrum product is so essential. Without a clearly identified product, how are you going to generate value? Yeah. And a product might be tangible, it might be non-tangible, it might be a physical good, it might be a device, something that you create, an appliance, whatever. It might be ultimately a service that you provide, it might be a digital service, it might ultimately even be an experience that you have in mind for your users. What is the experience that you want to give users? And that serves to provide value, but for me, it's not a product in Scrum, so it doesn't live up to the definition of product in Scrum if it's not about providing value to identified consumers. Just to counter the idea that anything in an organization can be called a product. Because if you produce something, a component of a product, and another team has to continue working with that or integrate that component in something bigger, and somebody else has to integrate that system into something else, then those intermediate things, for me, are not a product. They are parts of a product. They might be system parts. They might be components. They are not the product. So product around which you want to organize your Scrum, have a product owner, create a product backlog for, create increments of a product, have all the skills and expertise in the team to create those increments. Product means the product serving end users, serving consumers. Otherwise, we are fooling ourselves by making believe that, oh yeah, but this is a product. Yeah, maybe technically it is, but you know what? Ultimately, it's a component of a product. And as I said, product is the vehicle to deliver value. I always invite people to think about value in terms of value for whom. That makes it, I think, more clear. Value for the consumers of your product, obviously. Value for the people that sponsor you, meaning your organization, represented via your stakeholders. Uh, but also value for the people doing the work, what I call the creators of the work. So you've got consumers of the work, you've got sponsors of the work, but you also have the people creating the product. So that means for me, Scrum, introducing Scrum, adopting Scrum should increase your ability to deliver value, not just to your consumers, not just to your organization, but also for the people doing the work. That means the introduction of Scrum should feel valuable for them. In that sense, it should re-engage them, re-energize them, reveal or unleash that intrinsic motivation again. And self-organization, by the way, is for me a crucial aspect of re-engaging your workforce. So you might want to think about that. Value for the creators is so important. It's often it's so much overlooked. It's important. From research, they have found that organizations, businesses that really focus around that idea of psychological safety, engagement of their people, really benefit from that in terms of what is shown in those figures that they have captured in terms of business and consumer outcomes. So business sponsors, customer, consumer outcomes. So as two aspects of value. But on below that are employee outcomes. So organizations that really focus, emphasize well-being, a safe environment, a psychologically safe environment, an engaging environment, an inspiring environment for people. They not only have lower absenteeism, less turnover, less people leaving the company, less people leaving their team, less people wanting to switch departments, less quality incidents, but also less people with a burnout at home, less people with long-term absent sickness at home and so on, because that is, I don't know how it is in Romania, but over here, Belgium and the countries around us, I know it's a really, really dramatic problem. It just keeps increasing. I believe that in Belgium, around 10% of the workforce is at home with a long-term problem. Depression, sickness, illness, stress, burnout, and so on. That is crazy. I often wonder how much worse must it get before we realize that we have to do something fundamentally different on the work floor. And I believe Scrum can be that fundamentally different thing. But most important, taking care of your employees, of your creators, has as a result those outcomes. So focus on employee outcomes, and as a gift, as a side effect, you will have better business and consumer outcomes. That's a different way of thinking. Most companies overly focus on business and consumer outcomes and thereby burn out their employees. They keep up the rat race, the hamster wheel. We stress out people all the time. We don't allow them to self-organize. So we undermine our own business and consumer outcomes by focusing on them. So might want to think about that. Now, value, consumer sponsors creators, but why not value, looking at value from a broader or taking a broader perspective? Why not value for society? Why not value for your community? Why not value for your country, your region? Why not value for the planet? Why not think about producing products in a way that is beneficial to your environment, your community, society, the planet? That is possible. In the end, you know that as an IT sector, we consume tons and tons of energy. Think about your products, the way you're designed. How much of your databases is unused? How much of your code is never used? How many servers do you need? How many network connections? Whatever do you need? Try working towards that. You will create a simpler system that is easier to maintain, that is less costly to maintain, and it will be more environmentally friendly because you will consume less energy. So think about it. And closing the loops, Scrum should be full of feedback loops. That is adaptability, um, feedback loops. Overarching, obviously, sprint is a feedback loop. Yeah, because in a sprint we think about what and how against an overarching why. We reflect and improve on the what and the how within a sprint with that overarching why in mind. Within the sprint, we do that daily scrum, which is an inspection, adaptation, feedback loop. But on top of that, you would need much more feedback loops. And in practice, at least the way you approach that you handle development, let's call them development practices, I often call them development standards, um, are additional feedback loops within your sprint. Develop something, test it, code it, integrate it, performance test it, whatever, have a functional look at it, all those little feedback loops. So if you have clearly defined development practices in place, that they form feedback loops even within your daily Scrum. Daily Scrum happening on a daily basis every 24 hours. If you have like really strong development engineering practices and standards in place, they would happen even faster than that daily rhythm, that daily frequency. You might be doing test-driven development. You create a test first, a little bit of code to make it work. Reiterate over that. Add expand the test. Add a little bit code until it works, until it's complete. Check it in. Do continuous integration. Have functional testers looking at it. Think about performance. Think about SLAs that you need to live up. All happening within a day of work. So shorter feedback loops even than your daily Scrum. So think about your feedback loops in Scrum and close them. You could use a sprint, but even on top of sprint to close also the feedback loop with your users and your consumers. You could go live within a sprint and close the feedback loop with your users. So closing the feedback loop with your users doesn't have to be bigger, longer than the sprint. You could produce an increment throughout the sprint and already release it, capture the feedback already, maybe already take it into account, at least have that feedback ready by the sprint review, which is the what reflection of the sprint. Why not? So close feedback loops. If you don't close feedback loops, you're blindfolded. You have no idea because you don't know the effect, the impact of your work. Yeah. So, and in the end, Scrum is, that's what I said in my book long time ago already. Scrum actually for me is more about behavior than it is about process. The process of Scrum just provides us with a frame. What is really the power of Scrum, the potential, the benefits of Scrum is how people act and work together within that frame with development practices and so on and daily Scrum, but it's more about that. It's how people interact, collaborate, work with each other, understand each other, form a team, gel, become better. That is where the real power of Scrum is, in how people work with each other. And values drive behavior. And the Scrum values, a long time ago, 2002, for the first time described by Ken and Mike Beadle as something that is so happening in those early adoptions of Scrum. In 2013, I've described and I've tried to translate them into behavior. because that's the power also of the Scrum values. You have to give, in a way, meaning to them. What does commitment mean for you? For me, commitment describes engagement, dedication, doing something you believe in, doing something that you want to do. And that creates focus because if this is what you want to do, build that product together with your colleagues to satisfy your user, create a happy organization and have do it with hard work and getting fun out of doing that, then that is your focus. It will create focus. That means you will say no to anything that distracts you from your commitment, that takes you away, that pulls your attention away. So in that sense, adopting Scrum means as an organization, as leadership, accepting that people as from now on will say no to anything that is not part of their core valuable or value-adding activity. All those boring meetings get dragged into. You're entitled to say no because it doesn't help you be a better team player, build a better product. Yeah, openness and respect, very much human values, although that every Scrum value, every those 5 values can be sort of given meaning against the process aspect of Scrum and against the people aspect of Scrum. Openness, process aspect, openness for change. Human aspect, openness to work with other people, accept and even build on potential diversity in the team, even neurodiversity in the team, technical diversity in the team, differing opinions, conflicting opinions, and being able to deal with that in a respectful way. And all of this sort of courage is almost like sort of the glue, because all of what I just said, all those 6 traits, certainly enacting the Scrum values, but all those 6 traits require a lot of courage. Sticking to the simplicity of Scrum, focusing or emphasizing the importance of self-organization, closing feedback loops, being honest about results. All those things, showing, demonstrating accountability, having clearly agreed practices and standards in place and adhering to them. All those things require a lot of courage. So I want to think about it. The 6 essential traits that you can use to look at your team, your organization, and find out, yeah, but you know what is our Scrum? We are doing Scrum, but is it actually coming to life? Has it come to life? Is it really a living thing beyond the terminology, beyond the following the exact rules as described in the Scrum Guide? So those are the 6 traits that I find essential for Scrum. And after this, I sorry, really regret that I'm not able to be there. I wish that was possible because you're going to have beautiful in-person conversations around these 6 topics. And if it's okay for you and Mihai and the organizing team, I would love to feed you with some questions.
Yes, Gunther, we receive the questions and printing them out. So they're
Oh,
waiting
cool.
for the groups that will collaborate around each of the 6 topics. And
Okay, cool.
they will be thinking about answering those questions while they debrief the learning from your session. So thank you very much for those.
Yeah, okay, cool.
I have some questions too. So the audience has some questions. Maybe the people joining online have also some questions, and you can see those if they show up in the Q&A. And I don't know, some questions might come up with prizes. I don't know. Just saying. Okay, so here's to you. If you ask the question, please ask the question in a loud voice. You're as far as you are from the front of the meeting, as low the voice goes to Gunther. So not for me to repeat the question, you should shout it out. Okay?
Yeah, sort of.
Who wants to go? Ciprian has a question.
Okay, Gunther, I have a question for you. I hope you're hearing me. So,
Yes, I can.
it's about Scrum values. If you were to be able to add one more value, what would be that?
I would prefer to remove values. Yeah, I know. Yeah, sorry, it's not the answer. On a side note, I wouldn't add any value. I often get the question, why is trust not a part of the values of Scrum? And I think trust goes a lot with at least respecting people. Trust for me also has something passive, where I feel the existing Scrum values can be expressed in a more active way. My personal view on trust is also sort of the following. I can't make people trust me. Yeah, trust me, I know what I'm doing. It's not enough. That will not make people trust me. I can try to show that I'm trustworthy, hoping that in the end people will start trusting. So I can't, it's like sort of like intrinsic motivation. I can't download intrinsic motivation by plugging a USB cable into people's head and download some intrinsic motivation. I cannot make people trust me. So that one of the things that often come up. A very important for me, but as again, personal value is what I call integrity. I want to be known for integrity, being honest, trustworthy, uh, all those things, respectful, but also want to be, let me put it differently. So I've now been in one-person company for quite a while. I never thought in the past that I would ever go independent and go freelance and so on. But in the end, there were no more companies that I wanted to work for. So I had this habit of leaving a company within 2 to 3 years. And if I look back, every company that I left because of they were violating principles that I believe in. Not open, cheating, lying to customers, presenting things in a false way. I don't know. I just can't live with that. So integrity for me is very important. It's also why I ended up in this very poor situation of not having money, but at least having the pride of being independent. And then to come back to the question, I wouldn't remove anything. I'm still struggling because for me, the 5 values, commitment and focus are really closely related. For me, focus is the result of commitment, or if you have a focus, it will result in commitment. So really, again, openness and respect also very closely related. I have a half-day workshop around the Scrum values, and then ask people to think about those 3 things: commitment, focus, openness, respect, and then courage. And every time they see, oh my God, every group again identifies that they have much overlap, commitment and focus. So I would rather reduce it. It's not my thing. It's not my mandate. I have no authority to do that. But I think along those lines.
Right, thank you.
Hi, Gunther, I'm Nikolai. A real life challenge is to get feedback from stakeholders. They usually say, okay, they have no time to attend sprint reviews. We gave all the information to your product owner or business analyst, so don't bother us. What would be your advice how to approach them?
It's funny, the past 2 days I had a PSMA class, with a few people, also 3 people from Belgium organization, and they had sort of exactly the same problem. One of the problems but one of the problems that created that problem was the fact that they were doing sprint reviews almost within the team. Because you know what, stakeholders are afraid to invite them, whatever. So they did more like an inner team thing, almost like a few people from developers to the thing. And so no, try to make it an outwards facing thing. It's the event in which you want to reconnect with potential changes and evolutions outside of your team. In that sense, it's obviously mostly in the hands of the product owner, because the purpose in the sense of adaptation of the sprint review is what we call an updated product backlog. Now, with all of the events, certainly the sprint review, one of the problems is that Scrum is about inspection in order to be able to adapt. A lot of people just stick to inspection. A long time ago, I wrote a blog note about it, and I called it "Inspection without adaptation is pointless in Scrum." That means doing a sprint review often only for inspection, quickly a demo, whatever, without stakeholders, whatever, is pointless. You want to collect feedback indeed, like you say, but you understand that is the purpose of the sprint review. So it's for me up to the product owner to make sure that the stakeholders are there, to invite them, to also explain the importance, hopefully supported by the Scrum Master as a sort of teacher educator for the rest of the organization. In a way, I have no better way than to say it almost in a very negative way, but in a way, stakeholders that do not come to the sprint review deny themselves the right to inject changes. And I would almost drive it up to that point. It might require a very courageous product owner. Cool, nice change. Have you thought about coming to the sprint review next time? Because that's something that I would love the developers also to hear directly from you, why that is important for you. So it's an ongoing thing. It might also be related to the fact that you want a product owner working really hard to be really recognized also as a product owner. And the positive way to do that is present it as an opportunity for stakeholders to change their mind. In general, they're not used to that because often they were not allowed to do that in wonderful types of things unless you have all sort of strange change request procedures in place. Try to present it as an opportunity to change their mind next to the advantage of a team. So opportunity, agility as a business advantage might be arguments to use. The funny thing is this week, those two people from Belgium, they were also mixing up things. They were also doing something that is called PI planning. Yeah, I know. Let's for the rest not go there. But the one said, PI planning, it's sort of futile because we plan a quarter ahead. The day after PI planning, things have changed already. And then he was corrected by his colleague saying, no, that's the day after. The day itself already. The PI plan doesn't survive a day. And then why do we make it? In the end, people seem to want to make it in the end to be able to bash people, to blame people. But in the end, blaming people doesn't deliver you the value you were hoping for. So try to change that mindset. It's about dealing with change, being open for change, injecting change, and as an opportunity for stakeholder, yes, please, we will listen to you. Your product owner will try to deliver what you think is really important, but please help us out. Come check what we've done. It might not be complete, but we want your intermediate already on fine or whatever. We want your input. We want your ideas. We want you to see it working so that you can still change your mind. And play a little bit on the sense of importance. You know what? Also, we need you because you've got all this influence and you're so important within the company. And you know what other companies are doing. We all need that information at the review. I hope you found that I'm unable to answer in a very concise way.
So I don't see any new questions in the Q&A section on the webinar, but there are questions in the room. Already I see 2 hands raised. 3, right? 4. So we got just 2 prizes, guys, but 5 of them, right? So who wants to go next? I think I saw Raluca. He's one of the organizers. He can wait. So go ahead, Raluca, and then okay.
Hi, Gunther. My question to you is, what would you say to leaders that expect the benefits of utilizing agility, but without embracing really the Scrum values and the Agile mindset?
Yeah, it's a good one. It reminds me, I'm old, beard, white, whatever. So I like to believe that I have seen things. And your question reminds me of a very difficult period for me. It was around 2006, 2007. So we started with Scrum in 2003. Great people. By the way, we started with extreme programming. So let me promote extreme programming in this way. And it went beautiful for 3 years with basically the same team. We did different things. We did beautiful things in different domains. They were motivated. I didn't have to tell them to do this and to do that and so on. But in those years also, the sort of problem in those early years is that it's certainly here and a lot of countries, I believe, nobody knew what Scrum was. Nobody knew what a product owner was, a Scrum Master, let alone sprints. Nobody knew that. So we didn't call it like that. We gave it all sorts of different names. I was perceived by organizations and users as an amazing project manager. And I allowed them to call me like that or whatever, because towards the outside world, I was more like probably perceived as a very successful project manager. But my success came from not being a project manager, because towards the team, I allowed them to self-organize and they had those beautiful practices, daily practices in place and so on. But the problem after a few years was by not calling it Scrum, not giving it the name that it actually was. In a way, by then it was called stealth Scrum, so sort of hidden Scrum. After a while, indeed, we started noticing that people wanted, organizations, other leaderships, whatever, wanted the same results, but no, not with Scrum. And we had never called it Scrum. So there was this enormous disadvantage of not calling it what it was because people wanted the results, but no, Scrum, sprint, no, not that. Yeah, but we did it because the results were based on that. So not calling it Scrum, not helpful. And another thing that for me is really helpful in Scrum, it gives a sort of a common language. It has clear definitions, it has clear terms, but despite the clear definition of Scrum, there is so much openness with Scrum because we only have the rules of the game. The tactics to play the game are left to the people doing it. So, and that's a difficult message to get across. But for me, Scrum gives a common language. Scrum makes it very tangible, actionable even on how you want to become more agile. Because I love all those companies wanting to become agile, strive for agility. Fine, nice, but it seems up there in the cloud somewhere. What do you mean with that? How are you going to do that? So Scrum for me is a very tangible, actionable way to do that. And on top of that, it doesn't mean that every single team in every different context has to work in exactly the same way. So that is how I explain the advantage of Scrum in becoming agile. It gives a common language throughout the organization even. The danger of that is that it often leads to what I call industrializing Scrum to death. That means we're going to do Scrum. I know the last organization I worked with had 100 Scrum teams across the organization, and they all had to do sprints of 2 weeks. And even worse, oh my God, all the sprints have to start and end on the same date. And I see from a lot of faces that you will recognize it. And I'm baffled by that. I do not understand it. It is, you can standardize on Scrum without industrializing it to death. Making all the teams go through the same training, the same whatever, do the same practices in the same way with the same cycles and the same time, whatever. That industrialize your Scrum, you industrialize it to death. You can do Scrum in an organization, throughout an organization, but it might mean that for product A, you're doing different sprint lengths, a different sort of product owner. Your product backlog might be looking very differently. The items you put on your product backlog might be different. The development practices that you need over there are very different than in another context, product B or product C or whatever. So you mean standardizing on Scrum without industrializing it to death, getting that message across, meaning yes, Scrum is a clearly defined framework, yet it offers so much room for variation. Does that help?
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a question here, not sure the name, Georgiana.
First of all, thank you for looking at the camera. Thank you for the information that you shared with us. It's very useful. My question is, how can a Scrum Master optimize the process of the feedback loop? What would be the main aspects that we can focus on?
Yeah, always in the same way. I like this expression. It's from a book called Mastering Professional Scrum by Simon Rindell and Stephanie Okerman. Reveal, not resolve, but reveal in so many ways. Inject it, challenge it, ask questions in a very different way, steer towards a conversation. That means if you think as a Scrum Master that something needs to be discussed, be careful about your own judgment. You might be wrong, by the way, so be careful of how you bring it. Make sure the team talks about it, at least at the retrospective. In that sense, make your sprint retrospectives certainly open enough. Talk about all aspects that happened in the Scrum, not just technical stuff, not just the bugs you needed to fix again and so on, not just about development practices, but also how people, relationships, help the team look back at the complete sprint, every possible aspect, talk about it, and help them look for ways on how to avoid something, how to do something better. One of the techniques that I have is sort of silly faces. So something is being discussed, whatever, and I go, "Hmm, hmm." And I'm, is something wrong, Gunther? Are you ill? No, 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 okay. I was just wondering, what were we talking about again? When did that happen? And then in a way get them to talk about things. So, but don't instruct them. Don't think you're superiors to them. Don't act hierarchically, but make them help them talk about things. So several years ago, somebody asked me, "So Gunther, what is your favorite facilitation tool or your favorite facilitation technique?" Oh my God, I have none. I'm not into gaming. I'm not into techniques. Honest conversation. That is my favorite facilitation technique. Get people to honestly talk to each other, discuss things, get it on the table, look around the table. Is everybody speaking up? Oh, I see, Sam, you're not speaking. It looks like you've got something in your mind. It's something you want to share. So create that. So be, and next to that, so that overall means, in a way, take it to the team. Also, your concerns, your worries. Huh? Take it to the team, plus be an living example of honesty, of vulnerability, of the fact that you're a human being. Oh my God, guys, I don't feel well. Things are going wrong at home. Let's not go into details. I might look a little bit things so that you sort of set the tone for the atmosphere within the group. And at some point of time, I also produced a book with O'Reilly in the middle of the Corona crisis again. And a friend of mine in the Netherlands talked about or wrote an article about a sprint being a sort of a safe playground almost. And that led him and me to come up with the idea that what happens in the sprint stays in a sprint. So radiate towards people, create that safety for people to speak up.
Thank you.
I truly wish I could give short answers. Can't.
I also have a question. How does one maintain accountability within the team? Because sometimes it's easy to derail, like focus on your own interest or say
Oh yeah.
the job or I did my part. How do you remain accountable for creating value? And
Yeah.
that?
There's a couple of aspects to that. First of all, as a Scrum Master, as a product owner, don't take over. Don't talk about the how. The how is for the team of developers. And within the team, it's in a way that's difficult to get through. That's why I liked development team more than developers. They are collectively accountable. So it's one accountability. The developers, or what we used to call development team, it is one accountability. How to get that across to people. That might be with social things and so on. Again, at the retrospective, look back at the sprint. Why did we end up in that situation? Why was that now happening? It might lead to very difficult conversations where I don't, just an example, imagine at some point of time somebody saying, I'm the tester, there's no testing to do, so I'm going to sit idle. I just wait for testing work. Now, it might be a very difficult topic to talk about at the retrospective. Why did you not join the collective accountability? Why did you not do something else? Why did you not help maybe the analyst, or why did you not work with the coder to make sure that he or she thinks? Why did you not do anything else? Because anyway, it was not helpful. So certainly do not take over, but also lead, try to steer towards those difficult conversations where people not demonstrate their accountability and try to get the group to talk about it. There is, in general, at least in the end, always somebody who will speak up. Yeah, I didn't, you know what? I didn't like what you did by that. And then it's in a way a good point. So that's another thing. Scrum Masters should strive to be invisibly present. That's one of my my favorite things to say. Another thing is that a Scrum Master should be comfortable with silence. Difficult topic, nervous, whatever things. Everybody's silent. Let it go. Let it be silent. Okay, so after 3 seconds, nobody has spoken. Oh, I'm the Scrum Master. I must. jump in. If you do that all the time, then you set a sort of a tone, an example that, you know what, if we remain silent long enough, he or she will do it anyhow. So you make it too easy for people. So in a way, don't make it too easy for people. Keep pushing for that accountability. Keep sharing that you are accountable. It's your stuff, it's your event, it's your Scrum.
If that's okay, I would like to have one last question from the group. I would encourage people who haven't asked a question before are not the organizer. So if someone who has a new question, somebody else. Sorry, Nikolai. But Madalina, I think she didn't have a chance, so go ahead.
Thank you so much. I struggle a bit, Gunther, and I listen very carefully what you already advised us. But I realized I struggle with identifying at the end of every sprint, together with the team I'm working with as a Scrum Master. I'm Scrum Master for that team. I struggle to identify improvements at the end of each sprint in the retrospective, because I think the team I'm working with, I'm happy because it's a great team and working very well together. But still, I'm wondering, am I a good enough Scrum Master if at the end of the sprint retrospective, we don't find, one more thing to improve for the next sprint? Yeah.
Okay, cool. Great questions. Thanks. Sorry, Mihai, not a short answer again. So that idea of being invisibly present, you might have achieved that. So it's good. It's the ultimate purpose. You might not always be invisibly present, meaning you're present and not actively intervening or whatever. Maybe that is not needed too. So that might be totally fine. Another thing is that I know we stress on this. We use at least this idea of continuous improvement, but I think it puts too much pressure on us and on teams. I don't like that idea. First of all, it's not continuous, it's regular improvement. It might be continuous, no problem, but this idea of a continuous improvement is so stressful. What about maybe not just continuous, but regular adaptation? What about your sprint retrospectives being about identifying how are we going to work in the next sprint? And not just what are we going to do different, what are we going to do better, whatever. What is working, what is not working, what might be little tweaks even. So for me, it's more about if I would rephrase continuous improvement, I would at least go for continuous adaptation. What are new things that might be happening that we want to take into account? I remember again those first 3 years of Scrum, I felt regularly like, what am I doing here? But I have to say, those guys are brilliant, great. What do I need to do? And in the end, they when I was not there, they seemed to miss me anyhow. It's very strange, human beings, such a team. Sometimes just the fact that you are present helps. The fact that they know that you're there seems to help. Something in our psychology, whatever. So being invisibly present is fine. Think about using the retrospective not just to focus on improvements, but to focus on how are we going to work next sprint. If you look at how we have worked in the previous sprint, a great thing for me about retrospectives too, a great example I had with a large organization is at some point of time, I was there as an external coach, working with several teams, invited into often their major events, planning review, retrospective, whatever. I remember being at the retrospective of a team where at some point of time it seemed like they were always using the same format. Scrum Master collecting things, post-its, what did go well, what didn't go well, Scrum Master collecting the post-its on the wall, whatever, and then the simple fact that at some point of time I asked the Scrum Master to go sit down and not stand up and collect those things. And I asked, and then looking at the team, saying, okay, guys, this is your things. What are now really important for you? Just talk about it, please. And then the Scrum Master sort of got the message because just by standing up, he always made himself a little bit superior or hierarchical almost. Felt like people were reporting out to him. And he went to sit down, and that turned into a really vivid thing just after that. I also pointed out that dot voting on things are not necessarily the best possible technique. It might seem like some form of crazy democracy, whatever, but you want people to talk about what they feel is really important. And after a few sprints, they had changed their sprint retrospective totally. That meant every retrospective was facilitated by somebody from the team. Every sprint another person, and every sprint that person prepared it a little bit. They went for sort of gaming, what techniques do I want to use. The format was every time different, and it also gave a lot of space to the Scrum Master, like you are, so that the Scrum Master could focus on injecting things, conversation topics, is everybody feeling well, is everybody participating, rather than also having to facilitate. So think about how can you sort of hand the baton to the team so that you can focus on the topics at hand and maybe change the atmosphere from improvement to adaptation. How are we going to work next sprint? Including, did we produce value? Did we live up to our goals? What are our development practices? How did we work together? What about relationships? What about the timing of things? Did we produce value? What was the impact of work? All those topics. But help? Does
Yes.
that help?
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Please with the answer. So I think you hit the nail there, Gunther, with the have everyone in the team be a part of the facilitation process, right? Why not take over? So I like your long answer and the conclusion. Thank you. Now, there's a lot of resemblance between us two. You were very busy during COVID times. You were writing books, right? And with O'Reilly and papers and rewriting your own book. I've been very busy myself, right? I was baking, yeah? I was coffee, right? Also,
It's better than collecting toilet paper.
I also took some time to study for my PST license, which I'm grateful. The only reason I'm grateful that COVID happened. I wouldn't have got the chance to do that unless. So I think we had some common points. But speaking of your books, we have actually one to share from your Scrum Pocket Guides. It's a third edition, actually. We know you released the fourth. In the meantime, we have the third. And we want to have it as a giveaway, a present to someone. And we're asking you actually to pick a question that you like, not a person, the question, and we'll identify the person, right?
Okay. This is a very difficult thing for me to do, but God, I have to disappoint so many people. So I was thinking about asking you to do a raffle anyhow, and then maybe I'm too much of a coward. I'm Belgian, you know, we're shy little people, very, very modest, whatever. We think we're really, really unimportant. So and in the end, I felt like let's just go for the first two questions that were asked to almost show appreciation for the people setting the tone and having the courage to speak up as the first ones.
Well, the first one is not with here anymore. The second and the third, maybe?
Second and the third, then, because the person, first question.
Yeah. Was the second, maybe?
You were the second?
I guess.
Yeah.
And the third?
The feedback, about the feedback.
Gunther's book, right?
Yeah. And I want that person who has left already to be penalized and punished.
Very okay. Romania will penalize and punish people. So, but still, we have a second prize, which is a very cool prize. It's Agile Minds T-shirt, branded T-shirt, right? And that goes to whoever was the third person to ask the question. I think it was Luca. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. And now you hope it's the right size of T-shirt.
Yeah. It will make a good sleeping gear, right? Okay. So we have very nice interaction with you, Gunther, and found out a lot of more things that we want to discuss further. So for the next step, we're going to have some outcome-driven, facilitated discussions in more corners. And Bogdan here is going to introduce us to the next couple of 20 minutes or so where we're going to work together, what we need to do. In the meantime, we want to thank you once more. I will actually also close the webinar for the people who are joining remotely. And thank you for joining. and we hope you had a good time as well. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here. Thank you for having me. Have a wonderful evening. I'm also going to share a PDF version of my presentation. So Mihai, share it with the group.
I got it. Thank you. So I'm hanging now. And here he goes. And thank you everyone. Closing the webinar.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful evening.